Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our latest webinar. I'm so pleased today to welcome my friend Dave Ahrens, who is joining us. Dave and I met at the Clio conference in October of 2019, in the before times when we still were able to go to giant legal conferences and have a lot of fun. And gosh, that feels like ages ago now. But Dave is joining us live today, and he is the founder and CEO of a company called Unbundled Attorney. Now, the reason I wanted to invite Dave to join us is because, all of us at the LAWCLERK team, we are really interested in different business models, different ways that lawyers are practicing law, and seeing a lot of success with them. And so anytime there's a different business model to explore, that's something we want to definitely highlight and have a conversation around. Last week, I had a conversation with Dan Lear of Gravity Legal about subscriptions and how those work well into a lot of business models for different attorneys. But another really interesting business model to consider is that of offering unbundled legal services. So, the phrase unbundled services has become a pretty hot topic over the past few years, but perhaps like me, you've heard the phrase, but you're not really sure what it is or how it might work for you. Well, that's exactly why I invited Dave to present this webinar today. So, every time I see Dave, he shares really great stories about how his team at Unbundled Attorney is helping really innovative attorneys grow their businesses and their revenue by offering unbundled services. They really fill a major need in the legal industry, in my opinion, by giving more and more consumers access to affordable legal representation. And that's just a win for everyone involved. So now, without further ado, welcome, Dave. Thank you for joining us. And please tell us some more about yourself, as well as some more about Unbundled Attorney.
Well, sure. I am happy to be here. It has been quite an interesting year, and I think most people are very glad to be beginning a new year, but certainly comes with its new calamities as well. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how to provide unbundled services virtually and profitably. This has been a very hot topic, and we've got a lot of attorneys contacting us to learn more about how to effectively do that for two main reasons, I would think. One is that it has become more challenging, or in some cases not possible, to work with clients in person, in a brick and mortar way because of the pandemic. And so how do I make this transition to providing legal services virtually? And the second thing is, a lot of attorneys are understandably concerned about the economic situation in this country and whether clients are going to be in a position financially to afford, high retainers for services and whatnot. And so they're looking for more creative ways to structure their payment options so that it's more affordable for the average working family's budget. Not to say that this was a new problem. This is something we've been working on for a long time. Most people know the statistics of access to justice in the United States. In family courts, for example, we're talking, 70+% of clients in most courts are already representing themselves. So this is not a new problem, but it's certainly not going to be improved by the economic conditions we're seeing in the United States and across the globe. So a lot of attorneys are really concerned about or working towards recession proofing, so to speak, their practice as well. So the combination of, delivering services virtually and recession proofing their practice has been, the two main core inquiries that we've been, not only training all of our own attorneys across the country on how to do so, but also, working with new attorneys that are contacting us that, want to try to do the same for their practices. So I'm here to provide you guys with as much up-to-date material that is, directly connected to what it is that we've been helping our network of attorneys all across the country to implement into their practice, and certainly any new attorneys that come on board with and want to work with us. So it's going to be a crash course. I've got a lot of information here. I'm going to try to pack it in here in the 60 minutes and hopefully a little bit of time for Q&A. So you'll want to make sure you have a pen and paper handy, because I'm going to be going as quick as I can to try to give you guys as most value added and applicable training here that you can start to implement into your practices right away and take full advantage of the relationship you have with LAWCLERK.
Sounds great. I know I will be taking notes and questions too, because this is something I've been interested in and want to learn more. Certainly, if you want to drop questions along the way, I will help filter those to Dave as we go through the presentation. So awesome. Dave, take it away.
Okay. You'll need to give me the screen sharing capacity through the webinar here.
Oh, there we go.
Maybe an admin or something.
Yeah, try that now.
Okay, perfect. All right, can you see the screen okay?
Yeah, it looks good.
All right, awesome. All right, so again, we're going to be talking about providing unbundled services virtually and profitably. Just really briefly here, in terms of who we are. Unbundled Attorney, we have about 400 plus active unbundled attorneys all across the United States. What we essentially do is we educate both attorneys on how to effectively implement unbundled legal services and other affordable service options into their practice. We are what we'd be considered a mission-driven for-benefit company, which means that our main goal is to increase the affordability and accessibility of legal services. And so we empower attorneys to learn how to implement these kinds of service options into their practices. And then we also then educate the public about the availability of these services, how much they typically cost, and then connect those clients with attorneys in their local region that provide these services. And then we, of course, deliver those as exclusive leads that we deliver to all of our attorneys. And so, as an unbundled attorney, they receive leads from us every single day of prospective clients that are interested in hiring a lawyer for these various different practice areas: family law, immigration, bankruptcy, estate planning, and landlord-tenant. So we've got about 10 years under the belt for the team. Unbundled Attorney's been around since 2015. I personally worked with hundreds of attorneys over the years to help them implement the service options, and so coming from a wealth of experience and also a really unique perspective in the sense that we're seeing what our attorneys are doing all across the country every single day to adapt their practice for everything that's happening with the pandemic and the economic situation in this country. Okay, so a couple of things we're going to be talking about. First, I'm going to just give a brief overview of the most common payment options that our attorneys offer, and then I'm really going to be diving in and focusing on unbundled services. So this is broad overview here. We've got unbundled legal services, and we'll talk about the two types of unbundled services here in just a second. We also have a layaway payment plan. So for example, if you offer a flat rate service, let's say it's $1,000, if the client doesn't have the full amount of money up front, you can have them make a deposit and make payments towards the balance. And then once that balance is paid, you can then deliver that service. So that's a layaway payment plan. Another common service option is full representation on a payment plan. A lot of our immigration lawyers, bankruptcy lawyers, probate lawyers will offer full representation because there's less opportunities to provide unbundled services in those practice areas. And so full representation on a payment plan just means instead of taking a $3,000 to $5,000 retainer fee up front, you take a smaller retainer, let's say $1,000, $1,500 to get started, and then put them on a payment plan that's ongoing on a bi-weekly or weekly basis. So depending on the type of services you're offering and the amount of services, that payment plan varies, but essentially just lowering the initial investment that clients have to make in order to be able to retain your services, and then using payment processing services I'll talk about a little bit later to set up an automated recurring billing payment plan. And then of course you have the last option, which is full representation paid up front. That's the most common traditional approach to providing legal services. So today we're going to focus on unbundled legal services, and there's actually two main options. This is a misunderstanding. I think a lot of attorneys is they think of unbundled services as a la carte, like drafting documents, giving advice, and so forth, and assisting that pro se litigant with helping to represent themselves. There's a secondary option that's very common and also very powerful, very common service option that our attorneys will offer, which is pay-as-you-go or limited scope representation. So I'm going to talk about both of those. So first, let's talk about a la carte unbundled services. So here are some examples of some a la carte unbundled services that are commonly delivered by our unbundled attorneys every single day, right? So these are like, for example, letter or phone call, and some typical price points, $150, $300, depending on the letter or phone calls and the number of amount of phone calls. Legal advice and coaching and legal research. So some of our attorneys will do hour-by-hour coaching. So it's like being in the passenger seat, in the shotgun, and then helping clients navigate their way through the legal system, reviewing documents, providing advice, preparing them for court, and being their coach and guide on an hour-by-hour basis. Then you have giving legal advice and reviewing documents. And then probably the most common service options that our attorneys offer, that's an unbundled a la carte, is legal advice and document preparation. So you're preparing the paperwork for the client, delivering them the documents, and then giving them some guidance on how to file that with the family court, with the local courts. In all of these cases of a la carte unbundled services, the client is continuing to represent themselves. They're a pro se litigant, and you are providing them with unbundled services to assist them with the various tasks that they're needing in order to proceed with their case. Okay, so again, that's the a la carte unbundled services. And then of course, there's a secondary option, which we would commonly call pay as you go. This is more, and then the legal industry is typically called limited assistance representation. So this would be like option 5. You're not only drafting the documents, you're not just doing document preparation, but you're also entering a limited court appearance. And so this is where we attorneys are providing basically 100% of the tasks, but for one specific phase of the case. For example, in family court, they might petition the court for custody, file the documents, and they may make the appearance for the initial hearing for temporary orders. Right, that is phase one of the case. It would charge maybe a flat rate of, let's say, $1,500 to do that, and that would include having the attorney, advise the client, draft all the documents, and then file it with the courts on behalf of the client, and then enter a limited appearance. So this is commonly known as limited scope or limited assistance representation, LAR in Massachusetts. They have an LAR assistance training, but this is where you're also providing the representation in court. And the LAR can be provided at almost any phase of a case, with the exception of maybe a trial, right? So you can appear just for mediation, give advice, draft documents, go to mediation. You can appear for a hearing for temporary orders. You can hear for discovery. You can do all these different aspects where you're doing all of the legal work for that specific phase of the case, and you're limiting the scope of the involvement down to just that specific aspect of their case. And then from there, you have the opportunity, once that service has been delivered, for the client to then retain you for additional services, right? In any of this case, if you're going to be providing a limited representation or limited appearance with the court, you'll be filing a form like this, which is typically called the Notice of Limited Scope Appearance or Notice of Limited Representation. California is called the FL 950, Notice of Limited Representation. This is the example from the Illinois courts, Notice of Limited Appearance. Basically notifies the court that, hey, I'm just doing this one appearance. It'll describe the scope of the representation. It could be the discrete tasks that you're representing the client on, child support, child custody, not custody, or just that specific appearance or a specific trial date, or whatever it might be that you're assisting the client with. And then you, at the conclusion of that appearance, you will orally withdraw from the case or file a notice of withdrawal, notice of limited representation. And of course, each of these limited scope retainment appearance documents are filed by you, are signed by you and the client, right? And so, and of course, anytime you are providing limited scope or unbundled services to the client, you will draft what's called a limited scope retainer agreement. So this is in writing and signed by both you and the client, and will outline the scope of the services that are being provided, and also specifically the services you will not be performing, right? So I'll be drafting documents, advising you. This is and then also, of course, the price for the service, right? I'll be drafting documents, advising you, and the flat fee will be $750. I will not be providing ongoing representation in court. Or I will be drafting documents, giving advice, and then potentially entering an appearance at this courtroom. I will not be providing full representation beyond that scope. So that's what the limited scope retainer agreement outlines. And then we also have, if we would like, we can provide a sample limited scope retainer agreement that our attorneys will provide, will use.
That's just what I was going to ask, if you provided some sort of sample language for the attorneys that you work with. So that's fantastic.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, and we'd be happy to give you access to, some of our sample with limited scope retainer agreements so you can share with any of the viewers.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah. So that is the unbundled services and limited scope representation. Those are the two most common ways in which attorneys are limiting the scope of the involvement down to specific tasks. And why are they doing that? Well, it's because they want to make their services more affordable, so that clients that are not in a position to spend $5,000 to $10,000 will be able to hire them for services and receive some legal help with their case, right? And that's going to be continuing to be an ongoing challenge, and is what also is also having a pretty significant impact on the affordability and accessibility of legal services in the United States. So now, when you're delivering these unbundled services, a lot of attorneys might say, well, it's only $1,500. That isn't necessarily a whole lot of money. That might take me 7 to 8 hours to get that service out the door. So one of the things you can do nowadays, and what our attorneys do, is they'll leverage an online client intake and document automation system, right? And so here's some examples of online intake and document automation. The combination of Clio Grow and Clio. You could also use Documate, which is kind of an all-in-one intake and document preparation, document automation. And then there's another service called LawYa. The idea here is that you're making your intake forms available to the client online, which means they can go online, complete that intake form, And then all the information that they're inputting into those intake forms are then auto-populating directly into all the different spaces and aspects of the forms that you're preparing for clients on an ongoing basis. Any bankruptcy lawyers that have been doing bankruptcy for any period of time are probably very familiar with this process. Using a service like Next Chapter, or in the immigration world, INS Zoom, and certainly so because these are very document intensive practice areas, right? And so, but the idea is that you're not necessarily spending a whole lot of time receiving information from the client and then data entering it, writing it all down, and then having to then again fill out those forms and enter that information over and over again, right? So once you have a client intake completed and that's added to your online database or is connected to a document automation software, then anywhere that client data is appears in the forms, it will auto-complete. And so by using any of these document automation softwares, it will basically reduce the amount of time it takes by about 50% to draft the documents, because the forms are essentially 80% complete once the intake is done and is connected with the forms that you already that you're commonly using. And so just giving an illustration of this, we recently had Tuckercottingham, who's the CEO of LAWCLERK, on the podcast, and he gave both an interview. So it was kind of a two-part interview where we interviewed him on how he created LAWCLERK, what are the main benefits and features that enables for attorneys, and then he also gives a demo of the platform and gives you an example of how this works. And so you can access this interview at unbundledattorney.com/LAWCLERK, and that's where that interview is available. You can also go on our website and go to podcast and just watch the podcast there, but we'll give you a nice illustration and background as to how these document automation softwares can speed up the ability for you to get these documents prepared. Okay. Now, how does that translate to these unbundled services and limited scope representation? Well, the amount of time it takes, most unbundled services and limited scope representation, most of our attorneys are going to deliver that as a flat rate, right? They're not going to necessarily do it hour by hour. And the reason is because, the faster you can get a service like this out the door, the higher your effective hourly rate. So let's take some examples here, right? So effective hourly rate, EHR, right? So let's take a standard, limited scope representation. This is a very common service option that our attorneys will offer. And that's where they're drafting documents again, advising the client, doing the intake, preparing that paperwork, filing it to the court, and then doing an appearance, okay? So in the past, if you would have to, complete that intake manually, you're interviewing the client, writing down the information onto forms, onto documents, and doing that whole process, getting the date of birth, the names of other parties, children's names, date of birth, all that kind of stuff. So you're going through this whole intake process, which can take, 30 minutes, sometimes, at least, or sometimes even more. And you're also providing the legal advice. You're also enrolling that client for the services. And so between the combination of, enrolling the client, completing that enrollment, right? Educating them about the services you offer, talking about the price, signing them up for the services, having them sign your agreement, then doing the intake and, providing the strategy and so forth. That could easily take 2 hours to do that in the traditional way of approaching that, right? Then once you complete that intake form, now you need to prepare the documents, right? And so you need to go into the forms and fill out all the different forms and all the different spaces. And those forms can be really intensive. There's a lot of information. So we're then taking that intake information that you capture from the client and then kind of transferring it over, one field at a time into the forms, and then preparing the pleadings or the affidavit or declaration. So this can take, 3.5, 4 hours, something like that, to get these types of documents out the door. And then also in the past, if you were going to be doing a court appearance, you'd have to drive down to the courts, go to the courts in person. Sometimes your case would be heard right away, sometimes not, right? And so, on average, most of these court appearances, even though it should only be an hour, hour and a half, on average take about 3 hours, because sometimes you're in there for a few hours, right? So, $1,500, on average, maybe that would be 7.5 hours in the past. That's $200 an hour effective hourly rate. Now, it's not bad, but, it's not like something to be really, really excited about, right? I'll make $200 an hour. I provide $1,500 worth of services to the client. I make revenue that I otherwise wouldn't make. That's great. And, and also what we also found is that, usually 2/3 of the clients that you provide a limited assistance representation or some type of unbundled service to will transition to hiring you for additional unbundled services or transition to full representation from there. So that's all great and that's fine. So even if we didn't implement any type of legal technology, or you weren't using your law clerk paralegal like we're going to talk about here in a second, this is fine, right? It's a good business model. These are otherwise clients that would be walking out the door because they don't have the $5,000 to invest for representation, right? But now let's layer in online intake and document automation, and let's just talk about the way courts have shifted, because now when you're doing a lot of representation in courtrooms, they're doing them what? Well, they're doing it virtually now, right? And so when you do a virtual hearing, right, if your hearing's at 2 o'clock, you jump on Zoom with your client, it begins promptly at 2 o'clock. And then it runs for maybe an hour or so. You jump off with the client, you maybe wrap up with them, and then you're off, right? And so
virtual court is such a game changer, man. It's just a major time saver. Yeah.
It's a incredibly fast move in terms of efficiency, right? It's just become so much more efficient. A lot of attorneys are like, well, I really hope we don't go back to doing in-person hearings, right? Because these virtual hearings are, are actually working pretty great, because you get to stay at home, you don't have to drive to court,
no traffic,
and they begin right on time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. So let's kind of extrapolate that now with you have an online intake solution, and the client is now completing that intake themselves. They get a link through an email, they click on that, they go online, your intake form is online, and they're completing that form, right? And so you are not having to data enter or capture all that information from the client, right? And so now that time is saved, because you don't have to manually go through and data enter all that information. Then secondly, all that information is going to auto-populate right into the documents. And so just conservatively, if it was 3.5 hours now let's say it's 2 hours to draft the documents. And then when you're doing the virtual appearance, if you're doing limited scope representation, now instead of 3 hours, maybe it only takes 2 hours. I'm being really conservative here. Some of our attorneys are getting in and getting that 30-minute court hearing. It's done, they move along. But let's just say cut an hour off, of the travel time, right? So now we take that same $1,500 service, nothing really changed, except now you have streamlined your intake and your document preparation, and maybe you're just doing a virtual appearance. Now the total time to get that service out the door is 5 hours. And so now your effective hourly rate is $300 an hour. Okay, so this is getting a little bit more attractive. This is interesting, right? So now you are all in a unique position that you have had the opportunity to start working with LawClerk. And with LawClerk, you have virtual paralegals basically at your fingertips on demand, anytime, to be able to draft documents for you. And then I think once you establish, relationship with one of these freelancers, especially with their new subscription model they just came out with, you can have these freelance paralegals available to you at any time to draft these documents for you, right? And so now if we take out the document drafting, now let's say you're paying $300 to your LawClerk paralegal to draft the documents for you, right? So of that $1,500, now you're left with $1,200, but you don't have to draft the documents anymore, right? So you're basically enrolling the client, getting them signed up for the service, and having them sign your fee agreement and collecting the payment and giving them the advice. And then you're going to be reviewing the documents once the documents are prepared, right? So that's total about an hour or so now of your time to enroll the client and then basically review the documents once they're prepared. And then you're going to go to the court appearance, right? Because so now with the LawClerk paralegal drafted documents, that's now 0. Then you have the same court appearance time. So now we're talking 3 hours. So you still paid the LawClerk paralegal $300. They made money. They did the work for you. So now you're capturing $1,200. But because it only takes you 3 hours of your own personal time, even after your costs to the LawClerk paralegal, you're still making an effective hourly rate of $400 an hour.
So that doubles the effective hourly rate. I mean, that's really, that can change a lot of lawyers' lives with driving more revenue and less time. I do just want to clarify one thing real quick. With LawClerk, they are freelance lawyers. However, their role is limited to do work that is typically delegated to a paralegal, to paraprofessional type work. So that's where we get, even though I know it says paralegal here, they are freelance lawyers, but that's any type of work you would otherwise maybe delegate to a paralegal is a great piece of work to delegate to one of our freelance lawyers. And and Dave's absolutely right. You're going to get great work done at really affordable rates that can have a big impact on your bottom line and your own effective hourly rate.
I got to get that word, paraprofessional.
Paraprofessional.
That's
there you
the new
go.
word. Okay.
Yes.
I'm getting this thing down. Right. And so this is one of the things that is probably, I don't want to say like the best kept secret, but this is in terms of our unbundled attorneys and how they're delivering services to these clients and what's happened with the pandemic. Now the courts are going virtual. These flat rate services they're providing on an unbundled basis that the vast majority of clients can afford. If we were to send 20 leads of our unbundled leads to a traditional full service firm, maybe one person would have the $5,000 to invest. Whereas we send those same 20 clients to any of our unbundled attorneys that provide these unbundled services, and they're enrolling 4, 5, 6, 7 of these clients into paying services, right? Wow. And so we're really, 3xing or tripling or reducing by 30%, by 70% the amount of clients that would otherwise be unable to afford services. And so that's generating a lot of revenue and impacting access to justice. But now at the same time, attorneys are also doing extremely well financially because they're doing it as a flat rate, and they're leveraging technology and virtual freelance services like LAWCLERK in order to be able to get these services out the door very efficiently, right? And so these are all price points that clients are going to be very happy to pay relative to the traditional models of representation. They're going to be very pleased about that, and we'll talk a little about how to make it even more attractive to help them get started. But this is where it starts to makes a lot more sense financially to be providing these services to the clients, right? Okay, so now the next layer is, okay, how do we start to deliver unbundled services on a virtual basis, right? Because you can't necessarily meet with clients in person in some jurisdictions. And so how do we make sure that we're able to, enroll the client in a virtual way? And so the way we do this is we develop a process for simulating what it would be like if the client was physically with you in the office, right? And so if they were with you in the office, what would they do? Well, 95% of the time, if they're going to be hiring your services, they're walking out the door with a signed fee agreement and have made a payment to your office with a credit card, debit card, or a check, right? And so now, if they're not necessarily physically in the office, I can't hand them the fee agreement necessarily, and it doesn't come through the virtual window here. And so we need to be able to make it really simple for them to hand over that fee agreement and have them sign it. And we also need to make it really simple for them to make a payment with you. You need to be able to support electronic payment plans, right? So step one is the video consultation, okay? Actually, these are the 3 keys, right? So you've got the video consultation, you have a digital signature, and then you have electronic payment plans. These are the main pieces of the puzzle to be able to enroll clients virtually, because you're doing the video consultation and then you have your fee agreement to sign. So you need to make sure that they can sign that fee agreement with their finger right from their mobile device off the video call. And then of course, you're able to collect a payment where you're able to receive a credit card, debit card, or even set up a bank trap and do it electronically in real time through the video consultation, just as you would if they were physically sitting with you in the office, right? So how do we go about doing that? Okay. So first of all, why do we do video consultations? This happened for, when the pandemic hit, all of our attorneys were like, well, I can't meet with the clients in the office, so I'll just start doing all my consultations over the phone, right? What they found is that their conversion rate, like how many client leads, of ours that they would talk to, that they would then convert into a paying client, started to go down, right? Now, why would it go down if you're doing a phone consultation instead of in the office? Well, when you meet someone in the office and they meet you, if they get that face-to-face contact, it builds the relationship, builds the trust, right? Especially someone who might have come off the internet and was looking for a lawyer online. They haven't really met you yet, don't have a third-party recommendation. And so, when they meet with you physically in person, it develops that trust. You have a chance to, look at them eye to eye. And that's something that's really important to the client. They want to feel like they're cared about, they've met you, and they're very confident in the representation you're going to provide. And so when you just do that over the phone, it's just not the same experience, right? And so what we found is, once we helped all of our unbundled attorneys start transitioning either to doing it in the office or on a video consultation, video face-to-face, what we found is that the conversion rate of the video consult was about the same as if they were meeting with the clients in the office, as long as they had the other 2 pieces of the puzzle, the digital signature and the electronic payment processing, which I'll talk about here in just a moment on how to implement that, right? So as long as you can simulate the office consult and do the logistics of getting a fee agreement signed and collecting payment in the same way you would in the office, the conversion rate is roughly the same. So it's basically twice the conversion rate of a phone consultation if you just did it over the phone than if you did it over the video, right? So if I sent you 10 clients and you would only maybe see enroll 1 out of 10, you would start to enroll two clients out of 10 if you were doing it all on video consults. And that's when you really look at that financially, it's a huge difference. And so if any of you have been noticing, hey, I'm doing all these consults over the phone, a lot of clients aren't enrolling, well, you may want to consider start doing video consultations, Zoom meetings. I'll talk about how to do that here in just a second. And, it's also important to recognize that, pandemic's probably not going away for a while, but even if it did, our grandparents are using Zoom. The schools are using Zoom and video video trainings, education, right? Everything has shifted to video and it's become the new normal. Everyone's, unfortunately, our kids are stuck on Zoom all day long, and it's a culture that we're in now, and so people are used to this. They've worked with Zoom before, or they've done FaceTime or something like that, because in their day-to-day life, their job has shifted to remote work, their school shifted to remote work, their kids, whatever it might be. So it's become very common for people to be interfacing with people over video, whereas maybe a year ago, they're like, hey, that's kind of weird. I've never really done a video consultation before. Let me see if I can make that work, right? So there's a couple ways, different ways to do a video consultation. One is called Zoom on the fly, or video on the fly, right? So if you're on a phone with the client, and you just get right back on the phone with them and say, hey, looking forward to talking to you about your case. But before I do, just wanted to let you know we transitioned all of our consultations to video conference call. So I'd like to set up a video meeting with you. Are you on an iPhone or are you on an Android device? Okay, and then if you're iPhone to iPhone, you can just FaceTime them right then and there. Okay, great. So I'm going to FaceTime you right now. Hang on just a moment, and then send them a FaceTime. If you have these other apps such as WhatsApp or Google Duo, you may want to ask the client, well, do you have WhatsApp? Do you have Google Duo? These are just ways where the person doesn't have to install any software in order to be able to interface with you on video, right? And then you can also ask them if they have Zoom, right? If they've have Zoom, or have it on the computer or on their mobile device, that's certainly going to be easy. If they don't have Zoom, it just means that what you do is you send them a text message with your personal meeting ID. They click that link, they quickly install Zoom, and then they're on that video call with you right away. There's a little bit of a logistical, takes maybe like 5-10 minutes to get the Zoom meeting working, enable the microphone and so forth. But when you contrast that with, having to meet with the client in the office, client's got to drive, 10, 15, 30 minutes, find parking, you got to drive down, all the kind of thing. It's going to be better than having to do that, right? So you want to just be patient with clients and let them install Zoom. We are working on a way to be able to make this process of video to video a lot more simple on our side for the unbundled attorneys we work with. But these are the interfaces, these are the platforms that most of our attorneys use. And so you want to install all of these apps on your phone. And then you also want to save your Zoom personal meeting room link right on your phone, so you can text message it to the client in real time. So you're talking to them on the phone, you say, hey, we do all of our consultations on video. Do you have this app? Do you have this app? Do you have this app? Okay, no problem. I'm going to text message you my Zoom meeting link. Go ahead and click on that link, and I'll see you in the Zoom here shortly. Let me know if you have any questions on how to install the app. And then you stay with them right on the phone until they get on the Zoom call. Now, let's just suppose it's your assistant calling the client, or you're on the phone with the client. They're like, hey, this isn't a good time for a Zoom meeting. What you can do is you can schedule them. Oh, by the way, so we have this video consultation script. And so for those of you that might be interested, we can share this script, which basically just shows you how to get the client on that video meeting on the fly. So I'd be happy to share this with your audience here, Kristin.
That'd be great. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, so that's video on the fly. The second option is you can do scheduled video consultations. So most of our attorneys use Calendly, and because Calendly directly integrates with your Zoom account, and so you can create Calendly events that are tied into your Zoom account that are Zoom meetings, right? And so when you book a Calendly event, you book a meeting through your Calendly link. So if you're on the phone, your receptionist on the phone with the client, they can book that Zoom meeting link directly through Calendly, and the client will then receive the Zoom meeting links. They can access it, and a series of text message and email reminders. So that's worked really great. We've also developed an integration with Calendly, and so if any of our attorneys have Calendly, we just can give the client the option right off the website to book directly on the calendar for a Zoom meeting, and that's worked really, really well. If you do not use Calendly, you can also do an integration between Google Calendar and Zoom meetings, where you can actually create Zoom meeting events right into your Google Calendar. These have been really common ways that attorneys are setting up these Zoom meetings directly onto a digital calendar. The most important thing, though, is if you're going to use Google Calendar or a system unlike Calendly, you just need to make sure you're texting and emailing the clients to remind them about their appointments leading up to those events. Otherwise, you may end up with more no-shows than you would otherwise get. Right. And
those features, are they available on the free accounts for Calendly, or is that an upgraded feature that costs a few dollars a month?
Yeah, so that's the Zoom integration is available on the free account with Calendly, but you will not have the text message and email reminders. So, I think 95% or plus of the attorneys pay the extra $15 to Calendly to have the text messages and email reminders, because it's going to increase the amount of clients that will show up for those appointments, and they're not going to have to do that manually in their own practice to have to reach out to clients, hey, just reminding you got this appointment coming up, or staff someone to do that. So having a system that does that automatically is
definitely
pretty paramount nowadays.
Yeah, definitely worth it.
Yeah. All right, so that's the first piece. That's the video consultation. So you're either doing the Zoom meeting, video meeting on the fly, transitioning that phone call to a video call right there on the spot, or you're scheduling them for video consultations. That would be the recommendation. And then from there, once you're doing the video consultation, again, it's just like you'd have a consultation in the office, talking to them about your case, finding out their needs, asking what they'd like to see happen, talking about the various different service options that you offer, coming up with a service that makes sense to them. And then you're going to be enrolling them into the services, right? So two things that need to happen. First thing you need to do is sign the fee agreement, and then they need to make a payment. So how do we do the fee agreement? Well, quite simply, there's a lot of digital signature platforms that are available here, such as HelloSign, Adobe EchoSign, DocuSign. These are all digital signature platforms that make it really simple for you to take your fee agreements and make them digital fee agreements that you can send them a link to, and that enables them to sign that fee agreement with their finger right on their mobile device. And that basically, again, simulates that in-office consultation where they can sign that fee agreement. You can update these free agreements on the fly. The second option is you can use, the second piece is electronic payments and recurring billing. So this is also really common for our attorneys to make sure they have a credit card processing platform that enables electronic payments via payment link, and more importantly, has an automated recurring billing feature. So what you can do there is you can obtain the card info or send the payment link. Those are the two options there. What you want to do is process an initial deposit. So even if the fee is $1,500, you say, okay, great. Can you afford the $1,500 to get started? No, I don't have that rate available right away. Okay, sure. What can you afford to put down to get started? Well, I can do $1,000. I can do $500, or you can even offer. Can you do $250 to get started, right? Okay, sure. I can do $250, right? So then you process that payment as initial deposit, and you say, then I can set you up on a payment plan for the balance. Now, what can you afford? How often do you typically get paid? Do you get paid weekly, bi-weekly? They say weekly. Okay, great. Can you do $200 a week? Can you do $150 a week? Okay, great. You can do $150 every Friday. Okay, great. Then you can set up the automated recurring billing payment so that every Friday, the system will automatically process, let's say $150 right at the same time they're getting paid until the balance reaches $1,500, right? And so you can make it so that even if the person doesn't have the full amount up front, you don't say, hey, okay, cool. Well, just give me a call back when you got the $1,500. No, right? You just say, okay, no problem. What can you afford to get down to get started? You're not going to deliver the services. You're not going to deliver the completed documents or, the limited scope representation until the full balance is paid, but let them make that initial deposit and then set up a payment plan from there for the balance, right? So LawPay is a great service that a lot of our attorneys use. This is a link that we have. We have a great partnership with them where they will give a free trial of their service without the monthly fee to, see if you like using their platform. And this is a great way because they have not only the automated recurring billing feature built in, they also do credit cards, debit cards, and they can do bank drafts. And then fourthly, they also do have the ability to separate operating from trust account payments, right? And so whether you're taking a retainer fee or you're doing a flat rate paid upon service, you can have those funds deposited into operating or trust, right? So that's the final piece there. That's the three keys that's the video consultation, digital signature, and electronic payment plans to help you complete that virtual client enrollment process. So those are the main keys to providing unbundled services virtually and profitably. Again, that's the delivering service options that are more conducive to the client's budget, implementing legal technology to help you with streamlining the delivery of these services so it takes you less time to get these services out the door, and therefore is increasing your effective hourly rate for these flat rate services you're providing. And then, of course, making sure that you are delivering these services in a virtual manner. There's a lot more to this, of course, when it comes to practice management software and keeping track of time and all those types of things, and when you're starting to manage a team and all that. So, there's more to it on the virtual side, but the most critical component is you need to be able to enroll your clients virtually as well. And if you can do that, you can enroll clients, you can offer unbundled services, and you have these systems in place to be able to, speed up how quickly you get these services out the door. You're going to have no problem with seeing very high effective hourly rates for for the clients you're servicing. And then, of course, if you're able to do this virtually, as many of our attorneys are doing, then it expands the reach of your firm. You have a lot of attorneys that are now providing services statewide or throughout the entire region and so forth, because they just don't have to have the client driving into their office to meet with them. And so it really expands the opportunities there too.
I hadn't thought about that, about the geographic doors that it could open by going to this purely virtual practice. That's great. Mm-hmm. That's great, Dave.
Yeah. So from here, I can open up to questions or provide additional information on any of these aspects that we provide. If you have questions, you can also reach out to our team. We have the podcast. We have a lot of different resources available on unbundledattorney.com. So you can start to hear from other attorneys. The podcast essentially is us interviewing unbundled attorneys that we have in the network that provide unbundled legal services in their practice, and they just describe exactly how they do it. Here's what I charge. Here's how I explain it to the clients. This is the legal technology I use to deliver it and streamline it. So it's a really useful resource for you to start to learn, okay, how do I really get my head around this and hear it from other attorneys that have many, many years of experience doing that. So that's a really nice resource we have available on the website, so you can start to learn a little bit more about that. And then, of course, if you want to reach out to us directly, you can do so through any of these means.
Well, that's great. That's great that you are spotlighting some of your success stories through the podcast. Definitely encourage everyone to check that out and reach out to Dave and his team. I think that this is a really powerful way that the legal community can continue to help a lot of clients, and especially in the next few years. There's so much economic uncertainty, and this is something that I think we're going to have more and more clients asking for, and in some instances demanding. I think clients, no matter their economic position, they're going to become more sophisticated in interacting with lawyers and not being willing to pay, hourly rates for an unknown number of hours of services for full representation, especially. So to be willing to try this and do it differently, you're going to help more people. And Dave, you made a fantastic case today about how lawyers can make money doing this. This is not, these are not small numbers you're talking about. And I think it's really exciting. Now, I know, Dave, you've been so kind to refer some of your attorneys to LAWCLERK when they come to you and say, whoa, stop, turn it off, I have too much work, because a lot of your lawyers have seen some really great success. And that's definitely where our team of really talented freelance lawyers can come in and help you go through this process of getting the legal services completed in a very time-effective and cost-effective manner. So definitely check that out. And we even have a really cool video feature too I wanted to mention, because you're a big proponent on video, which I think is great. And I love that you encourage folks to interact with the client on the tool they have for video. That's so important. But within the LAWCLERK platform, when you are working with a freelance lawyer, you can click a button. If you're both online at the same time, you can click a button and do a quick video conference within the platform without having to set up a Zoom link or a FaceTime or anything. And just, if you're both online, you can quick talk, and you don't have to have the camera on. You could even just do it audio if you're working in your sweatpants. So, but yeah, video is definitely here to stay. Clients love it. Lawyers love it. Why didn't we do this sooner? So awesome. If you have any questions, please go ahead and drop those. If not, Dave was so kind to provide his contact information. You can follow up with him and his team one-on-one. I really appreciate you taking time to have this conversation with us about how this can be a really smart, really powerful way for lawyers to do law better and help more clients. Thank you so much, Dave.
Yeah, happy to be here, and certainly excited about what your platform enables for both our attorneys and any attorney really that's looking to, offload some of the aspects of running a practice that are not necessarily the best use of their personal time. And when you start to offer flat rate services like this, if you're able to serve more clients and do it in a really efficient way and not necessarily handle some of those other aspects of the case, we can all see from this presentation how that can start to make your time a lot more valuable financially. Right, because you can focus on acquiring more clients, servicing more clients, increase the capacity of your firm. And that's really the main challenge that a lot of our attorneys have now, is when we're generating all these unbundled attorney leads, and they're like landing clients and retaining the services. And the next question is, well, how do I get all this legal work done?
Right.
And so to have your LAWCLERK platform available to say, hey, I need some legal research done, or I need these documents prepared, is just a really helpful resource for them to be able to keep up with all the legal work and do it all in a virtual manner as well.
Definitely. And if you're curious about how you would keep up with that kind of a demand, I definitely want to encourage everyone to check out the video that we did on our Teams feature, because that's probably your best solution, is to take full advantage of our Teams feature, which allows you to build as many different types of teams you need by practice area or by type of work. And then when you find top rated freelance lawyers, you can add them to the different teams. That way, if you get a new client in on a divorce case, you can go to your family law team, assign that, get the complaint done, get the initial discovery request formed up or whatever you may need, but you can build as many different teams as you need to fit your workflow. So check out some of the resources we have on Teams, and that would be a big advantage. So, well, a million thanks, Dave. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And certainly if you're watching this on the replay, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Dave. We're happy to be a resource for you as you move forward in your legal career. Thanks, Dave. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.